Time to cover the AFC South as we enter the final days preceding the draft. The four teams in that division have needs. Let's go one at a time, Chris. The Colts cannot leave the 2020 draft without what?
Well, I think the position that jumps out to me, defense pretty well built. We know the offensive line, defensive line, pretty good depth there, good talent. You know, I look at them right now. I think it's between, for me, I would go wide receiver or tight end. And I think if you pinned me down, I would go wide receiver. You know, I think that, and again, they don't have a first round pick. So they're going to have to figure this out. But with T.Y. Hilton get up there in years, Paris Campbell, who they drafted in the second round last year, you know, kind of being unproven to this point. You know, Devin Funchess, they lost him in free agency. They have Zach Pascal, who's good, but just a role receiver. You know, so to me, that would be one I would think that Chris Ballard and the Colts think about somewhere in the second, third, maybe middle of the draft, regardless, to bolster that position and find a little more depth and talent to improve that wide receiver room.
And anytime that subject comes up, the words that echo in my brain came last week from Eric DeCosta, the Ravens GM, when he said, in the fifth round this year, you can find a starting receiver. That's how many great receivers there are entering the draft. And you're right, that's an area of need. Eric Ebron left via free agency to Pittsburgh. Tight end is an area of need. I want to throw one out there. That we're going to maybe touch on this a little bit more next hour when we talk about the next running backs to get paid, because not every running back that has generated a 1,000-yard season early in his career is going to get paid. Some teams may say, no thanks, we'll draft somebody young and cheap with full tread on the tires. And I wonder where Marlon Mack falls into that category of, do we pay him or do we say, see you later? Because if they're going to say see you later, now's the year to get the replacement because Mack's entering his contract year.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. And I would think that Chris Ballard would be that one of those type of guys that we talked about yesterday, looking at the shelf life of a running back, going, you know what? Every 4 years, every 3 years, I need to just draft one somewhere in the draft. You know, they have a little depth at the position. Naheem Hines, Jordan Wilkins there at the running back position. But, Mike, I'm with you with the running back thought. I like Marlon Mack. I don't know if he's definitely a big-time starting tailback, in my opinion, either. So I don't think that's a crazy thought.
And remember, the move that really unlocked the Colts' dynasty, semi-dynasty, was when they drafted Edgerrin James. Not that he was still there when they finally won a Super Bowl, but he was a huge piece of that puzzle to complement Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison and eventually Reggie Wayne when James arrived back in 1999. All right, the Houston Texans, who do not have a first-round pick, do not have a second-round pick, or at least one of their second-round picks now. They picked up a second-round pick in the DeAndre Hopkins trade. They gave up a second-round pick to get Brandon Cooks. They can't leave the draft without what?
Well, it has to be a front seven player. I think that's the thing that I look at right off the bat and go, got to be done. You know, J.J. Watt up there in years. DJ Reader gone in free agency. All right, so I'm going to say a defensive lineman is the most important thing to them. I'm just going to keep it broad there. I don't care if it's an edge guy or somebody in the middle, but, you know, this is a team that's lost Clowney. You know, I talked about Merciless getting up there. Who are some of the young studs on the Texans defense? You know, that's a big question for me down there in Houston right now. And Billy O'Brien, the GM, yeah, he's got some holes to fill in that roster, certainly. But I look at it more than anything, depth and just talent. They need the defensive line position. They really probably need a little of everything. D tackle, D end, need it all.
You know, you've suggested in the past the possibility of Jadeveon Clowney working his way back to Houston, as no one seems to be interested in him. He's been lingering in free agency for weeks. If they don't come out of the draft with that help, maybe that makes a reunion more likely. I'm going to flip it back to the receiver position, and Eric DeCosta's prediction, you can get a starter in round 5. All due respect to Brandon Cooks, that does not replace DeAndre Hopkins. They still have a gap there. And you know, one of the things, Chris, that I'm going to be paying close attention to, that 57th overall pick in the draft that was sent to the Rams for Brandon Cooks. What do the Rams do with it? Do they take a receiver? And boy, that receiver in comparison to Cooks, that's the guy the Texans could have had instead of Cooks for a lot less money. Or whichever receivers are still on the board at number 57 that the Texans could have had for a lot less money. And how much would a team get out of that guy? How much does a team get out of that guy who's available at pick number 57? I still have concerns about giving up that pick and the slot, the low value, not high value, but low pay slot that goes along with it instead of paying Brandon Cooks with his concussion history and everything else. They need to come out of this with a young receiver that will make people forget that they gave up a shot at getting a very good young receiver to get Brandon Cooks.
Well, I mean, I hear you. There's a lot of logic there. They need to find another receiver too, just in case. Like, you're right. Not only DeAndre Hopkins thing, but if Brandon Cooks gets another concussion in week 4, everyone's gonna go, "You idiot! What were you doing?" Of course he gets concussions. That to me was the lost in translation there fact of that trade. The fact that a guy like that commanded that much in a trade where the next time he goes over the middle, it might be the end of his career. That's where I was a little surprised. He fits the offense, Cooks, and what they want to do. But you're right. They need another guy there because, really, 2 out of their 3 starting receivers have injury history. Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller, as we both know, have been on the bench a lot because of injuries the last few years. So I think your wide receiver thought has a lot of merit.
Will Fuller, a first-round pick in 2016. He missed 5 games last year, was hurt all year long, and even when he did play, there was a question whether or not he was going to be able to play. Constant hamstring problems, and as you've said, when it's the hamstring, that means there's something else going on, and maybe they finally figured it out. Who knows? When he played last year, he played very well. He had a career-high 670 receiving yards, but that's not the kind of stuff that screams out number 1 receiver, especially if you're not playing in all the games. The year before that, he only played in 7 games. The year before that, he only played in 10 games. He has not been able to stay on the field, and so they need to have more bodies. They need to have guys they can turn to because Deshaun Watson needs people to throw to. And now that his security blanket's gone and DeAndre Hopkins, what the hell is he going to do, Chris? They have to fill up that position.
No, they do. You're right. And I mean, at face value, the starting 3 look really, really good. And that meshes well with the offense they want to run. They could send all 3 deep. Cooks is a great route runner to do a lot of the Julian Edelman underneath stuff for that New England type offense, which Billy O'Brien runs. So it makes sense in theory, but risky for sure. With those 2 guys and their injury history, your season could be derailed in a hurry if 2 of those go down in the first 4 or 5 weeks. So you better get some depth of the position.
Tennessee Titans, who made it to the Final Four last year and had a 10-point lead twice in the first half at Kansas City. They can't leave the draft without what?
Well, I mean, I look at them and I look at really the defensive side of the ball more than anything. The offensive line, yes, they lost Jack Conklin. We know that. They got good running back, A.J. Brown, a receiver. So they're okay on the offensive side of the ball. I look at the defensive. I'm going to go with the defensive line once again. I'm going to go with the edge, like a, defensive end, outside linebacker type. That's what they need. I really should just say defensive lineman in general, but they need a front 7 difference maker. They got Jeffrey Simmons, who they drafted in the first round last year at defensive tackle. They're expecting big things for him. That's why they traded Jarrell Casey. But, great defenses, Super Bowl defenses, you need another marquee player on that defensive line somewhere. And to me, that's where they're missing. Like Harold Landry's nice coming off the edge. I know they signed Vic Beasley, but I'm not going to put all my eggs into he'll get after the quarterback and get 10 sacks. No, he's been very inconsistent as a pass rusher through his career. So, and it's only a 1-year deal. So I go edge rusher there in Tennessee, somebody to get after the quarterback a little bit.
They got to replace Jack Conklin, though, at right tackle. I mean, they didn't pick up the option on Conklin last year. He had some injury issues. He got it together and had a big contract year, parlayed that into a big contract with the Cleveland Browns. Well, now they got a hole. Well, one of their starting 5 is gone. And, yeah, you can always say next man up, but you still need bodies, and you need to have guys who provide depth. Whoever you push up, you have to backfill, and you need to have healthy offensive linemen and capable offensive linemen, or you're not going to keep your quarterback healthy and capable. And they've gone all in with Ryan Tannehill, who managed to stay healthy last year, but we know based on his history, there are times when he does not. The Jaguars, they can't leave the draft without what?
Well, similar here to the rest of the division, you lose Yannick Ngakoue, Dante Fowler in the last 2 years. Telvin Smith retired. I look at, okay, man, they need some defensive linemen. But I think the more overarching thing that worries me about their roster is the cornerback position. That's the most underwhelming thing on their roster. So I look at that where you've lost Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye. You go, man, it's not easy to replace that group right there. And right now, hey, they have some nice players, some guys that have kind of been career journeymen, but they don't have a marquee guy that they can say, hey, go cover Brandon Cooks on 3rd and 5 and get all over him. Or, go cover T.Y. Hilton on 4th and 5 and we need you to lock him down. They have nothing like that. So to me, the cornerback position at some point in this draft has to be addressed, not only to find quality players to play, but also they need just depth at the position. They don't have enough corners on their football team in general right now.
And it's funny, not long ago, there was kind of a consensus. It wasn't across the board, but people who got it knew that Ramsey and Bouye were the best two in football. Now they're both gone. Ramsey basically dug his feet in the ground and finally got a trade, and then they pulled the plug on Bouye out of the blue and shipped him off to Denver, and now they're starting over again. And look,
Mike,
you mentioned Ngakoue. You mentioned Ngakoue. Ngakoue's still there, but he wants out. And the thinking is they're going to make a move maybe before the draft, during the draft. They're going to have to replace him. So for me, it's edge rusher because Ngakoue is going to be gone. They're going to need to find somebody in the draft who can fill his place on the roster, Chris.
Yeah, it's definitely an important position. They play that Seattle defensive scheme. We know you need guys that can come off the edge. Now, they got Josh Allen in the first round last year, but I hear you. It's important. They need to get there with the front four in that Seattle scheme. That's what they do. So it makes a lot of sense. And Mike, Jacksonville's fascinating. They're kind of in a rebuild mode, and it's just amazing. And it shows you in the NFL, they went from having one of the most talented rosters in football 2 or 3 years ago, where you went, wow, look at this squad and all this young talent they have. And it just all went sideways the last 2 years, and things got really thrown out of whack there. And now look at them now. They're kind of in a rebuild mode down in Jacksonville.
And it's strange because they're one of the only teams in football that we look at it and say they're rebuilding, but their owner may say, I don't care. I have high expectations for this season, and I think he wants to see something that will give him confidence in sticking with Coach Doug Marrone and GM Dave Caldwell beyond 2020.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.